Welcome, friends, to the Oak Grove United Methodist Church podcast. We are here today to talk about Sage Stories. We're celebrating the wisdom and grace of senior adults at Oak Grove United Methodist Church. I'm Krisy Kuo, the Director of Senior Adult Ministry here, and I'm here today with Pat Moulton, who is one of our senior adults, and she has a really interesting story to tell us about, and we're just really excited that you're here to watch and listen along. Tell us who you are and how you got here.
Well, I'm Dr. Patricia Moulton, always known as Pat, and I moved to the Oak Grove area in 1988. We'd been living in another part of town, but moved here. I had been going to St. James Methodist Church. When we lived half mile from Oak Grove, it seemed logical that we should move our membership here. We knew a lot of people in the church, so that's how I got to Oak Grove in 1988.
So what brought you to the Atlanta area?
I moved to Atlanta in 1968 because Emory had offered me a job teaching in the dental school. At that time, I was practicing general dentistry in Chapel Hill, where I had gone to school. But my husband had always wanted to teach. I was perfectly happy practicing, but he wanted to teach, and so we moved to Atlanta. And it turned out to be a very good thing for me because I never took any education courses. I had always said I didn't want to be a teacher. But teaching dental students was different. For one thing, they were grown men. There were no discipline problems. And for another thing, it was more demonstrating what I knew how to do and was trying to teach them. So I found that I loved teaching at Emory.
So tell me a little bit more about your career as a dentist.
Where do I start? I didn't start out to be a dentist. I majored in chemistry in undergraduate school. I went to an all-women's college, Meredith College in Raleigh, North Carolina. And I was sort of taking a pre-med course, but then I decided to get married, and I didn't think being a physician was compatible with family life. A lot of women have proved me wrong on that since, but dentistry seemed like a nice compromise because you could sort of control your hours. So, and I always like to work with my hands. Krisy, I like to fix things. And a dentist gets to fix things all day long. So I liked it from that point of view.
That's neat. So after graduating from Meredith College, you went to dental school?
Then? I didn't go right away. I had a fellowship in the chemistry department.
Okay.
And then the baby came along, so I gave that up. And I actually worked as a technician in the medical school for a while. And then went to dental school.
Okay. And you went to dental school in North Carolina as well?
Yes, at University of North Carolina. I was the third woman to go to school there. They'd had two other women graduate, so they were not entirely unused to the idea of having one. They hadn't had many, and I was the only one there during the time I was there.
Yeah. So in our conversations before, you talked about being one of the early women in dental school and how it felt a little bit awkward. Can you talk about that?
Well, I didn't know what to do.
Yeah.
Like most women, I thought, what do I wear? So I looked around at what the nurses were wearing and what the other students were wearing, and I just substituted a skirt for their pants and put on the white jacket like the rest of them were wearing, and off we went.
So you were the third woman dental student, but not to skip ahead a little bit, but you were the first at a lot of things. Can you talk about those firsts a little bit?
Well, I was the first woman to set up a dental practice in that area in North Carolina.
Oh, okay.
And that was a little different. And I always made sure that the name on the door said Patricia, because I wanted people to know for sure that they were coming to see a woman dentist. I didn't want there to be any surprises there. And one of my patients confessed to me once that he and his wife brought the children first to see me on the theory that their teeth were going to fall out anyway. And if the children got along all right, then they might come themselves, which they did. So that was one of my first, was practicing dentistry. Then we'll skip ahead a little bit, but Emory offered me the opportunity to take prosthodontic training. So I did that and became a prosthodontist. Some people say, what's a prosthodontist? Prostho means replacement of, like prosthetics, legs. But prosthodontics is the replacement of missing teeth. So crowns, bridges, dentures, that kind of thing. So after I became a prosthodontist, I was offered membership in the American Academy of Prosthetic Dentistry, which was the premier organization of all the good prosthodontists in the country. Very limited membership, but I was the first woman invited to join there, and I felt very honored to do that. And then I decided to take the certification board to become a certified prosthodontist. That was not really important to anybody unless you were in the teaching profession, but it was widely respected and understood that if you were going to teach, you really needed to prove that you knew what you were talking about. That was a very rigorous exam, Krisy. It was given in 2 parts. A written exam in February. You had to go to Chicago to do this. And then in the summer, you showed up with a patient and actually treated that patient while all these men stood around and watched you. That was a little nerve-wracking, but we got through that. Actually, a woman, I was 44 at the time, another woman had started taking the exam, and she got through the first part, and she died in the interim between the 2 parts of the exam. So actually, I was the first woman who survived
the examination.
And I became the first woman certified by the American Board of Prosthodontists.
You were also the first woman faculty at Emory, is that correct?
I was.
Yeah.
I think they were getting more students, and they really wanted a sort of a role model for them, somebody they could look at and say, oh, that's what you're supposed to wear.
Right, because when you were going through your prosthodontic training and examination, you were the only woman surrounded by men in that field.
I went to college with all women. I went to dental school with all men. And one thing I've noticed is people are pretty universally people.
Yeah.
There's not that much difference.
Yeah.
Back to the prosthodontic exam, I was the first woman certified. And I was proud of that.
Yeah.
But I'm also really proud of the fact that I was not the last. A few years later, I tried to find out how many women had actually gone through that, and they couldn't tell me because they weren't separating out by gender anymore. And that's when I thought, yes, we have arrived. They could tell me how many lived in each state, but they couldn't tell me how many were men and how many were women. And I thought that was real progress.
Yeah. And in fact, your daughter followed in your footsteps.
My daughter is a dentist. Yeah. She came when she was at Emory and told me she had applied to dental school. And I told her all the reasons that wasn't a good idea. And she said, how do you expect me to believe that when I know how happy you've been? So she also is a dentist. She joined the Navy, which I thought was pretty adventuresome.
Yeah. So you entered this field as somewhat of an outsider, but you were offered opportunities to be included. How important to you was that feeling of inclusion or acceptance within the field to your success?
Yeah. How do you know when you've been accepted?
Yeah.
I just showed up and sat there and took notes and took the exam. And after a while, I think the guys just thought, oh, well, she's just one of us. And that's sort of the way they treated me. By the time I graduated, they told me they respected the fact I had never asked them to carry my equipment or anything. I was just there and doing it.
Yeah. You said, so a lot of the information I got from you, I found through a publication that was created by the American College of Prosthodontists. And it was a history of women in prosthodontics. And so you wrote an essay, and in that you offered some advice for young women entering the field. And you said, my wish for all young women was that they would be treated equally as dentists, not women dentists. And my standard advice to them is to be prepared to assume equality and accept the responsibility when it comes their way. So, and it sounds like you represented that advice that you are giving as well.
I'd forgotten that I said that, but that's good advice.
It's great when you say something and then you hear it later and you think, wow, that sounds good.
It's okay.
Now, let's talk about your family a little bit. You know, usually nowadays, men, and then too, men do not get asked how they balance family and career. Women get asked that all the time. Coming through your training and your professional upbringing, this was especially true, that women really had to balance their career. And can you talk about that a little bit?
Well, that was hard because there were days when I would rather have stayed home and taken care of my child. But one thing I was extremely fortunate with, my child was good. She was an easy child. She wasn't sick very much. And she just kind of was part of the program. And my husband was very helpful. He had encouraged me to go to dental school, and he realized that there would be problems. So he assumed his share of the child rearing, and that helped.
Moving on a little bit, can we talk about your faith a little bit and how maybe that influenced your career choice? I think oftentimes, we choose careers based on our gifts and our talents. Perhaps we feel called to do a certain job or career path or vocation. And you talked about how you really had a knack for fixing things. And in your essay, you also mentioned that, that your dean actually discouraged you from going into prosthodontics because he said it was too mechanical.
Too mechanical.
But can you talk about that, how your gifts, maybe as a person, but also as a woman, could really benefit you in prosthodontics?
Well, people have told me that women make better dentists than men actually because our hands are smaller and we can get in the mouth and do things easier than larger hands can. Women are quite skillful with their hands. From an early age, they embroider, they sew, they knit, they do things with their hands. Of course, men do too, but usually in a larger sense.
Yeah.
So I suppose that helped. I don't know that I was ever called to be a dentist in that sense, but I felt that the profession lent itself to my talents, so to speak. Basically, I like people. I like dealing with people. I like helping people. And so that combination sort of contributed to the profession. You ask about my faith. I grew up in a very Christian-centered household. We always went to church. Some of my earliest memories are church. And so I didn't have this one eureka moment when I realized that God was calling me to do something or other. God was just always there. It was the base layer of life. And as I moved on into my marriage, my profession, it was just always there.
So in what ways have you been involved at Oak Grove United Methodist Church over the years that you've been attending?
At first, I wasn't deeply involved in anything. And then my husband passed away. And I had some good friends in the church who told me that their Sunday school class was going to take a trip and I should go. So I did. And that way I got to know a lot of people in the Seekers class. And I began going to Seekers. And then I joined the choir at that point. And that was another layer of support, another layer of friendship. One of the ministers here one time said, "You don't belong to the big church. If you really want to be a part of this, you have to join the little churches, a Sunday school class, a choir, a study group, some way to get involved with fewer people and not the big mass on Sunday morning."
Yeah, that's a great thing about Oak Grove is that there are a lot of little ways that you can get plugged in, and you don't have to do everything all the time, but choose what fits you in your lifestyle. And,
right.
Yeah.
And the choir really meant a lot to me.
Yeah.
And then I had a real catastrophe in my life. My house burned. We lived half a mile from the church, just off Fair Oaks. And I came to Wednesday night dinner and to choir practice, and when I got home, the house was in flames. And that was stunning and traumatic. And but before the fire truck got there, Glenn and Kathy Etheridge were there.
Oh, wow.
And through the whole thing, there were people in the church. That happened on a Wednesday night. Women always say I have nothing to wear. Krisy, I literally had nothing to wear. Everything had burned up. But I knew that I had to go shopping. I had to get some clothes because I had to be at Oak Grove on Sunday morning to sing in the choir, and I was. So that was always there as something pushing me forward, keeping me going. And the people in the church were so supportive.
Having a faith community through a crisis like that.
Yes.
It's really important.
Makes you really appreciate people.
Well, is there anything that you'd like to share with with our listeners and viewers about life in general, about the church? Is there a tradition at Oak Grove that you have really loved?
Well, of course, everybody loves Christmas at Oak Grove.
Yeah.
That's always meant a lot. I love Christmas.
Yeah.
Like I say, my faith was with me from childhood, and I've tried to live my life according to the principles of the church. I think we get along better when we consider the needs of other people first, and that's what I've tried to do with the few talents I have, like fixing teeth. I've tried to always do that with the other person's best interest in heart.
Yeah. Well, this has been so nice talking to you today, and we're so grateful for your contributions to the church and your continued presence in the church.
It's harder. After the house burned, I moved to Park Springs, and I have to give a plug for Park Springs because it's such a wonderful community. But COVID and the drive-in, and I'm not as involved as I once was, but it's always nice to be here. There's always a welcoming presence at Oak Grove. You can walk in the door and feel like you're a part of things.
Yeah. I've enjoyed speaking with you, and
thank you, Krisy, for giving me the opportunity to share my feelings on some things.
Oh, love it. Well, thanks everyone for joining us and listening or watching the podcast. We hope that you will join us for the next episode.